What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Mastercrafted. We are here with another installment of Turn Zero Tactics. Phil, how you doing today, buddy?
Good, bud. More 40k keeps rolling in. I had a great weekend watching WTC. All the boys getting the Team USA win for the first time in a while, knocking off France's technically two WTC undefeated streak. They have not lost a game in a while. They just lost their first one against Germany. I don't know. I was so hyped watching that. It was great to see.
Yeah, crazy weekend. I still am just trying to find more and more time to go back and watch as many games as possible from that because it just was such great players, such good games. Want to be a sponge and watch as much as possible. But there's only so much time. And to save you time, that's why we're here. We're here to help you learn how to play these missions better. And the topic today is priority assets versus recon. We have the lovely missions of Search and Scour and Vanguard Operation. So we'll go ahead and, as always, I'll talk through one, Phil will talk through the other. First up, priority assets, they have Vanguard Operation. A friendly unit performed a Vanguard Operation this turn, and one or more enemy units were destroyed this turn. Those are your two any battle rounds. The action is worth 4, the kill is worth 2. Moving on, second battle round, and after end of your command phase, rounds 2 to 4, and then end of your turn in the 5th battle round. As always, control one or more objectives for 4 VP. You love to see it. And then if at the end of the battle you do control your opponent's home objective, you get a whopping 10 whole points. To go through the action real quick here, you do have to do it in your shooting phase. As always, one friendly unit within one terrain area that is within your opponent's territory once per turn. You can do this, and then at the end of your turn, if no enemies are within that terrain area, you do complete it, and then your unit has performed the Vanguard Operation, scoring you that sweet 4 points. Yeah, a solid primary. We'll dive a little bit deeper here in a sec, but first Phil's going to read out Recon.
Yeah, so we're doing Search and Scour. This one's relatively straightforward. Recon doesn't have any actions in this one, which is interesting. You control one or more central objectives, that's worth 3. One or more enemy units that started the turn with the terrain area is destroyed, so we still have to be able to kill things as the Recon player. And then end of your command phase, for each objective you control, excluding your home objective, you get 4. So it's not just control 1. It's for each objective you control, which is interesting because I think there's going to be some ways that we need to get points back as a recon player. You'll see shortly. And then end of the battle, no enemy units are wholly within your territory. Yeah, there are some armies that you will never be able to stop from doing that. There's some armies that this is actually doable into. So yeah, we'll go through it all.
Hell yeah. Alrighty, well, first, we might as well go ahead and dive into the first layout. Layout A, some nice Crucible of Battle, and as always, I feel like Crucible and Search are generally a little bit better in terms of like balanced spacing of layout, Phil. I don't know how you feel about it, but just off the rip, I feel like this is actually a map where I go, crazy. I actually have a little bit of choice in where I can stage and how flexibly I can play on this layer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So like obviously this feels very nice to be this close to our natural objective, to have units staged here. It allows us to lock this down pretty effectively with good units, touching this edge right here, or even better, like this and staging here, depending on the asset. And when I say depending on the asset, what I mean is like, very low durability units are going here on the edge, right? They're hiding, they're putting decent OC on here, and they're making sure they're not going to get touched because they can't survive a lot of combat. High durability units, or things that can reactive move, or things that can put themselves at -1 damage, or -1 to hit on top of benefits of cover, right? Like anything that is a better durability that can push this bubble out even further. Basic fundamentals is that's why I'm deciding to push a unit here up into this corner, or maybe it's more of an aggressive unit that I could use as a threat piece to go forward. But like right off the bat, this area is very safe, so we have a lot of room back here to work with. And then we have a great staging area right here, right behind this L, which is very nice. We can come in and touch this terrain, and then we can kind of make sure we maintain hidden. And the nice part is this corner right here is a 2-inch wall. So even for a lot of our bigger vehicles, right, we can still use this space because that is a 2-inch wall, and we can drive over it. Like we could drive over it and then come up here and touch, which I've done multiple times. And now I can suddenly see, because If you look on the layout options in terms of, let's see here, terrain setup, you can see that there's no eye here. Designates that the two pieces of terrain are separate. So if you see this eye is crossed out, that means these two pieces of terrain are separate. This eye is whole. These two pieces of terrain are together. So I could touch this piece of terrain, and because this is all one, I can see everything through it, which is very nice.
Yeah, it's very very nice, and I think that's one of the other things that I do like about this board is for once kind of that pocket you originally pointed out, in front of our home. It actually is short ruins for the most part. You do have to deal with the tower in the middle of the 10 by 2.5, but overall, generally on a lot of these maps, they put one tall one with one short one, and it's like, cool. Well, I only can go one way. It's super nice to be flexible here because you also have a very easy time going from that pocket to right behind the center objective. Like, that is such a hard line to draw onto anything if you're not touching it. Like, it's very hard to interact with you as a staging point with vehicles, even, and aggressively just be like, hey, I'm going to sit here. And unless you come tag on and draw a line because of where the walls are on there, it can actually be really, really difficult. And there's also only a really narrow line that goes, as we're looking at this map, below and above that center objective. It's just such a thin line of sight, and for them to get that line, they have to be touching their natural, basically, to see through it or something, because that's actually a really hard place to put vehicles, is behind your natural, based off of how the 6x4 does have a dense feature on it. So it can be a little tricky there, but in general, if your tanks aren't uber wide and uber big, like, my plan is always just like, well, I'm just going to drive through my natural, and then I can see up the side of the board very well. I can still see towards the middle pretty well, or I can tag on one or the other, as Phil was mentioning, because since the eye isn't connecting them, you can kind of cut off one line of sight without really risking the other. So that can definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, because like it is very reasonable to say that, I could have a good shooting asset depending on my opponent's composition, and I could work my way up to here. And if I can do the same thing on the other side of touching this corner in any way, and then now I'm drawing line of sights into the center objective. Now I'm drawing line of sights back behind it. I can threaten a lot of things from this position. So we'll talk about it in a second. But these missions are very interesting because Recon is kind of doing like a take and hold style idea. Because yes, you do have to kill things, but ideally you need a turn where you score two center objectives. And we'll do the math here in a second so you guys can see why, because it is drastically different in terms of scoring.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. We've talked a little bit about the flow of the game. We still need to talk about infiltrators. We can't forget those. We might as well touch on that before we dive into the math, as we talked about positioning. But it really comes down to the missions, right? As a priority player, you need to be doing the actions on objectives that are, or on terrain pieces that are within your opponent's territories. Now, every single one of these have the two little side combo little L's, or little terrain pieces that make an L, that barely cross over. Those are actually the bread and butter a lot of the time, because since your opponent, the recon player, needs to control the center by the end of every turn, right? They're going to be fighting over it. Like, there's safe places you can still do this action, but you have to make sure they don't have anything on there, right? Like, you really have to commit. So the bread and butter as the priority player is actually doing it on those little ruins on the side, to where it is technically within their zone, but you're still very, very far back and very safe and hard to interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because unfortunately, the objectives say all it says is it has to be within your opponent's territory, and it does not call out your unit. It's just the terrain piece. So, like this one that kind of catches the corner, that unfortunately is within your opponent's territory. So I could do it on this corner for this terrain piece because, as we saw previously, the eye is there connecting these two. This is all one terrain piece. So I could touch there, do the action, do it multiple times over and over again. Now, let's do a little math real quick just so we can remind people of what the totals look like. So if you do the Vanguard operation action every turn for 5 turns, that's 20 points. If you control your home objective for the 4 turns, right? Now we're looking at 16, so you got 36. That means that if that's just 36, control your natural, do the action every turn. Now, let's say for 4 of those turns, let's say they don't give it to you turn 1, they don't give you a kill. They might because they have to touch that center objective, but not every unit that touches that center objective is actually going to be killable, whether it be lone op, whether it be stealth, whether it be a reactive move. Like, there's a lot of units that'll come up there and you won't be able to kill initially. Let's say you just do it for 4 turns, so 8. That gives you 44 victory points. 44 victory points. And that's pretty easy. That's pretty straightforward. The end results of controlling your opponent's home, that's not real. Like, if your opponent gives it to you, great, take it. Like, you'll max out.
It's win harder
Congratulations. Yeah.
generally.
And it's end of the battle, it's not end of any round, right? Like, yeah. I wouldn't consider yourself with that because I just told you we could get to 44 and not even really break a sweat.
Yeah. Yep, it is very, very solid. Yeah, looking at the recon side of the mission, though, they're working a little bit harder, for sure. Controlling one of the center objectives, you need to be trying to do this at the end of every single round. Whether it's, you're going to have to be killing them off as well, because guess what? That's the second part of it, is getting a kill on something that started within a terrain area. Generally, these are going to go hand in hand, especially from the second round onward. We'll, again, in this scenario, we'll do what Phil said, right? We're going to discount your ability to do it first round. Maybe they didn't put anything on a terrain piece, no free kills. Okay, cool. We're going to have 5 rounds at 3 points, so 15 off of controlling the center, assuming you do it every turn, and then another 8 points, bringing us up to 23 so far. And then if you control your natural, that's 20 points, so we're at 43. But we'll also, I think it's fairly safe to assume that, right, if you're controlling the center by the end of your 5th battle round, you'll get that extra 4 points. So that should be another 20 points based off of that. So we are at 23 between the top. We're at 23 on the top and 20 on the bottom. We are at 43. If you can ever control the center an additional time, that puts you over the top. Or if you can keep them out of your territory, that's going to be another 5 points, putting you over the top as well. The problem is, this is much more in the hands of your opponent than the priority assets player has, right? The scoring on paper seems like it's all there, but if your opponent as priority can ever say, you know what, I threw 1,500 points of my army basically on the center of the board, you didn't kill it all, I still control it, boom, there goes 3 of those points. It's a lot easier for them to start ticking away. So I think that's a very, very big thing that you need to be paying attention to.
100%. And that's why, priority assets is such a good mission, is because they have the control in this matchup, and believe it or not, Recon feels like the one that they're scrambling for answers, which is not what Recon needs to do, because, the Recon lists have been interesting. I think there's a lot of different ways you can play Recon, but this one you are slightly on the back foot because your opponent has agency to deal with you, and you don't necessarily have as much to deal with them. So, what do we need to do? Lane, you already talked about it initially. This is obviously a great position to be in. Do you ever realistically need to touch the center?
Well, as a shooting army, I try not to until it's time to put everything there as a priority player, right? Like, I'm going to be sitting there. I might put some Bulgrin on the back edge to be like, well, you at least have to auto-see me and stuff, and try to offer the only thing for them to get the kill on a terrain area is my tough-to-kill units. If I have paper, it hardly ever touches the center on a mission like this, because I don't want to give them an easy 2 points. They're going to have to work for it, and they're going to have to chew through 6 Bulgrin, and that's just generally a winning equation for me. So that's the general principle of what I am trying to do as a priority player. I'm trying to also, we talked about that nice little pocket down at the bottom where, because of those 2 terrain pieces being connected, you can get away with doing your action from a fairly safe location. The big thing is also trying to make sure you're buying yourself space, whether it's like harassing their natural and keeping their resources at bay and tied up farther away to make sure that action piece is safe, right? Again, because remember, like, that piece itself is going to give up the kill something on a terrain area. It has to be on the terrain area to score the objective. So trying to go forward and push their natural, especially with, again, shooting assets, armies that are very shooty prefer this matchup, in my opinion, as priority versus priority players that play melee. Like, because as a recon player, you just go, all right, well, I'm going to park all of my shit on terrain areas and you'll never not give me the kill, because unless you just don't interact with me, I'm going to kill you off terrain piece.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some slight positioning things that I think the recon player or the priority player should be doing, right? Like, if we're going to come up and we're going to do the action here, well, you got to make sure every single one of these boys is touching this terrain. The reason is you need to maintain hidden, you need to maintain cover, you need to make sure that anytime you go up and do this action, you make it as hard as possible for your opponent to actually kill the unit that came out and touched it. Because Lane is absolutely right. If you're able to kill the unit that's on the center, if you're the priority player, able to kill the unit that's on the center, and not put a unit on a terrain area besides the one that's doing the action, like, that is a good position to be in. That is a sustainable game plan going forward, because that it forces them into a no-win position. They might not even kill this unit, and that's very, very difficult for the recon player, who we just talked about how hard they have to work to get towards those things. The other thing is like good OC or a good heroic, right? Like, you could always threaten that. You could have a unit touching this wall, and then you could have another unit right behind it, or even better, like along this edge, to threaten the heroic of anything that comes after your 5-man that's touching this piece of terrain. If you have good OC, priority assets, like, there's so many different variants of lists that are running priority assets. There's Imperial Knights that are running it. So you have big giant knights that are touching this, and it's like, okay, I did the action, I'm going to shoot the shit out of you, and also I'm touching this piece of terrain with an obnoxious 10 OC. What are you going to do? Are you going to come out with something real and try to kill it this one time? I hope you kill it, because I'm going to crack a Feel No Pain, or I'm going to crack an Invul, I'm going to rotate Ion. Like, I might live. And then suddenly, maybe that causes you haven't flipped the center objective, and also you haven't gotten your kill, and also you've exposed a bunch of stuff to try to kill a knight, because you have to expose real things, and then the knight's going to turn around and kill a bunch of stuff, right? Or you have priority assets, which is like max Terminator bodies, and it's like, okay, now they're definitely not scared, and they're just going to run, and they're going to sit in the center here, and they're going to say, okay, you either have to put enough OC here to actually flip it, which is relatively difficult, especially some of these that are running banners, or they have OC manipulation. And it's like, okay, well, you have to put enough OC to flip it, or you have to charge Terminators. Have we not learned the lesson yet of like 4-wound Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators are not necessarily things that people want to interact with, depending on the detachment and what they do? Like, definitely very interesting, but you have that as a real meta choice, whether it be Grey Knight Terminators or Space Wolf Terminators or just generic Terminators or Blood Angels Terminators. Pick your Death Shroud Terminators. Like, pick whatever that you don't want to go into. Priority assets, and that's why it's so popular right now. It's across the board. A lot of armies have good access to it and detachments that they want, and that is really, really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things I would really want to, advise the recon players to really think about is how can I get after those pieces, right? I as a priority player, I just mentioned, right, we really want to try to protect that piece that's going to do our action over and over and over again, right? As the recon player, if you're playing a very wide army and you have a lot of units, right, even if it feels like a big trade down, going and killing whatever action pieces is sitting there doing that is generally going to be worth that trade, right? If you can thin out priority assets action pieces, this is generally true across all mission types. If you can thin out those action pieces, you have a better chance at making it harder for them to really do all of their primary, right? So I think that's a major thing. And also realizing, right, that's one of the other things is if you can bully them from your natural and push towards that piece we were just talking about, and again, you don't even have to go past it, right? If you can yourself as a recon player, if you have hard to kill things, you can go toe that piece that they want to do the action on and say, well, now you have to kill me, right? You have to kill me before your action will complete. And if you do the same in the center, guess what? They are forced to come deal with you. And I think that's the best way to set the tempo is you need to be saying, all right, I am going to plan to just put a trash piece touching the backside of these walls. Basically, it's going to be insanely hard to shoot unless you come peek around the corner, right? Or you're going to have to charge me and put something out here. Either way, you're almost guaranteeing that you have something that I can interact with, right? Like you just are going to be somewhere I can deal with you, right? And if we're playing a wide board and we say, hey, you're not going to get a free action anywhere, though it is going to cost you some units. The thing is if as long as your list is built generally correctly, right? you're going to have enough pieces, hopefully, as a recon player who's expected to be everywhere all the time in all your missions. You can kind of set the tempo, and as you get later in the game, you're still going to have big units that can sit on that center there, right? And for both players, I think one of the major things is understanding rapid ingress is still a huge threat, and it can flip that center, right? If you're the priority assets player and you say, well, nothing's on the center, but you can just have it, and they just sit on the backside of the wall, and I have a rapid ingress that's at least 3 or 4 OC, I could flip that center. Like that's a huge difference for me, and as well as also potentially putting myself in a spot where I can really go be aggressive and push them even farther back and hopefully hold them off of that center objective for a whole nother turn besides just out of seeing them.
Yeah, because the Vanguard operation action specifically says that there can be no enemy units within that terrain area. It has nothing to do with control, has nothing to do with anything else. So Lane is absolutely correct. If we could think of the point swing here. A rapid ingress on the place where you are obviously doing an action. Maybe that's the only unit that's touching. Okay, I've stopped the action. That's 4 points. Now I potentially could control another objective at the start of my turn. Well, for the recon player, that's an additional 4 points. And then also on top of that, I will control a central objective. It's pretty much giving me a free one there for 3 as long as I control at the end of my turn. And then now I'm in a great staging position to go after a unit that's touching a piece of terrain. That's an additional 2. So we're talking about a recon player netting 9 points and the priority assets player losing 4. Now, I'm showing you now because it's actually really important. How many times does the recon player actually want to come out here, maybe touch this terrain, touch the center terrain, touch this one, create this bubble of, hey, you have to actually kill this piece instead of coming out here and trying to do the action pretty much for free. Like, you have to kill the unit that's touching the terrain area. You're not doing this every time. Like, don't do this every time. I'm telling you right now. But what you do need to do is something that we've talked about multiple times is do a little bit of a pre-measure, right? I'm taking and I'm looking at every unit that can touch a terrain area within my territory, which is the important ones are these 3 across the bat. Obviously, we're checking our ones that are within our deployment zone, our natural objective. I don't want them to touch a corner, but they still have to kill the unit that's within it. But I'm really focusing on these 3 and saying, okay, which one could you get to realistically and do the action on? If my opponent is only threatening one terrain area, then that makes it so much easier for me as a player of okay, well, they're only threatening the central right now. I don't need to worry about anything else. I can be off this piece of terrain and not give up an asset because as the recon player, assets, as we just talked about, are so important, especially as the game goes on. I need to deny the action, or I need to force you to multiple commit with units to deny the action, and that needs to result in you touching the terrain area after this is all said and done. Right? I need you to be able to be in a position that you're touching the terrain area. So if you push out 2 units, one to kill the unit, and then the other to do the action, great. I need to go out and kill both those things. So you pre-measure, you say, okay, my opponent, maybe they made a mistake because they realistically should, as the priority player, you should be threatening 2 every turn. If you're threatening only 1, it becomes a lot easier for your opponent to actually stop you from scoring, which is not great. You don't want your opponent to have control of your scoring as much as you can help. So right off the bat, definitely interesting, but you're pre-measuring that. I'm touching if I can. And then I'm just going to say, okay, well, what's in a position? We already talked about this great staging area right here. What's in a position right here to pop out and say, okay, you're touching this terrain area. Remember, this is all one piece. I understand this is dense terrain here, but this is all one piece. So I could realistically come up, touch here, or touch here, and now I'm getting shooting lines into the unit that's come up and done the action.
Yeah, talking of rapid ingress real quick, I am curious, Phil, if you're touching the back of that terrain piece we're currently talking about, the little nub on the back of the one your cursor's over.
Yeah.
If you put an 8-inch bubble on that, or you measure 8 inches, and they're just towed on, can you come and drop on the back side of the wall? I believe you should be able to, because it should be 6 inches long and 2 inches wide. So that's another amazing, not just the center. I talked about the center. I want to specifically say that if you're not careful, somebody could easily just drop on the backside of that and ruin your plan as well.
I'm gonna go with yes.
I mean, just
I'm pretty sure.
mathematically, I guess we shouldn't even have to measure thinking about
You
it.
could you could drop right here very realistically with some
Mhm.
units and still deny this.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things, right? If you're playing somebody who doesn't know that that is a possibility, not only do you deny their points, as we talked about, but you're now in an incredibly aggressive position that you can definitively go kill some stuff in whether it's the scoring piece or go tie up their next unit that's back here, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's like you really can get just so much value out of being aware of how this primary actually works and how easy it is to just step onto things if your opponent is not careful.
Our rapid ingress is so good. That's why it's the best strat.
Yeah. Let's see. We've talked a fair amount, right? We went into pretty good depth about how, as a recon player, right, using positioning, you can help deny easy access and force more of a commitment out of the priority assets player. But as the priority player, right, we've talked a little bit about it, but denying the center, right, that's the real key that we're looking into on how do I, as a priority assets player, really try to affect their primary scoring. And it's going to be putting hard to kill units on terrain whenever possible and not paper any chance we get. Now that'll help us with tempo. That'll help us in general just deny their kill points without them overcommitting. And then also we're generally looking for a go turn if our army has that capability. We're trying to put a rock piece out there, say, hey, you're going to have to commit a lot to deal with this. And then after that, we're trying to hammer them home and deal with a lot at once, while also putting a ton of OC and material on that center objective ourselves if we can. Right, that's not going to work for every player, but that is like the most consistent general path you can probably pursue.
Okay, Lane, where are we infiltrating? Is it pretty obvious on this layout?
I feel like it should make a lot of sense. This is another one, right, of especially if we have multiple infiltrators or things with reactives, especially being right there behind the center ruin and also being right there behind the ruin you just indicated. And that goes for either player, honestly. If you're the recon player, you can kind of go aggressively behind their easy ruin. You can even be touching it with one model behind that wall to say, okay, well, now you definitively have to put something on the center, right? And you can use it for tempo reasons there, because that little nub that's behind that bottom center ruin is outside of 8, and it puts us in a pretty good spot to just say, hey, one model's on here. It's not super easy to deal with, and we're denying that easy access to scoring off of that one, and we can force them to put something on the middle, especially if that's something we would prefer as our army, because if you're particularly fast, based off of where the natural staging, if we're talking about the blue player, right, and we're looking at the top L of the 10 by 2.5, with a jump pack unit, let's say we have something that moves 12, right? Even with some advance and charge that's staged right there on the deployment line, it's actually not that hard to get after things on the center objective.
Yeah, very realistically, like 12 inches gets us to there. And then if it has decent advance and charge, it's coming out and touching all of this stuff. So absolutely. Now, let's talk about starting on a terrain piece for those infiltrating units, because this might be the one where you do it. This might be the realistic one where you put out there. If you're the recon player, and I'm speaking as a consistent recon player, I'm that dude. I run recon, I run disruption. A lot of the time, especially because we're doing teams now, especially as a captain, I'm trying to make sure that all my guys are playing their preferred army on their preferred disposition. So I will take whatever's left. Like Lane knows he's playing disruption this coming weekend, like because he's taking care of the boys, he's running custodies, but like you have to sometimes do that, and that's okay because I want, like, my enjoyment is taken out of everyone else having fun, and I can play whatever. So that usually leaves me with recon. It usually leaves me with disruption or something like that. So we have to be a little bit more innovative. So if my opponent doesn't have any infiltrators, which some priority lists don't, like, we just talked about knights. There's other, space wolves. There's other armies that don't have infiltrators. Great. That means I can pre-measure you so easy and say, okay, I know you can get on the center, and maybe I know you can get on this terrain piece. One of these models is going to touch. I'm going to measure the furthest away from you. This still has hidden. It's going to have go to ground too, because I'm going to put them behind this dense wall. So they're going to have 12-inch. You're really going to have to come out to get these guys. And potentially turn 1, it's not going to be enough to actually, you're not going to have enough stage tier to do that and do the action. And I'm measuring both those. So that's 1 turn, because the Vanguard operation action you can do turn 1 for the priority player. But if I can pre-measure you and say, okay, you're not getting the center, you're not getting this objective or this terrain area, great. That's 1 turn of 4 points that you have not gotten. And either my opponent will have pushed out too much to try to get after that, or they'll just give it to me and it's like, great, I've denied you, and we take those. We absolutely take those. The only downside is if our opponent goes first, and this is what we've done to stop them, I don't get the extra benefits for controlling multiple objectives until turn 2. So yes, there's a slight downside, but I'm the recon player. I have to find points and I have to find denial somewhere. So like that is a real strategy of starting on this terrain area, starting on this piece. You can only do it against certain armies, but if I can deny the initial rapid, or they infiltrate here and force my opponent to go further back, great, fantastic. And then also it's very hard for them to stop this infiltrate. It might even just be impossible unless they really, really overextend. And if they do that, great. They've given us 2 points to kill a unit on a central objective, and then potentially get it in our control when we start our turn. So yes, very realistic positioning here, very real option, depending on the army you're going into.
Yep, 100%. And then reflectively, as a priority assets player, obviously, right, if we know they have infiltrators, we should probably put them in that pocket to make sure they can't just drop and deny us the easy one on the pocket, right? That's your priority. In general, let's say you do go second, right? And you have a lot of stuff that's planning to just go there that was your second wave anyway. You can infiltrate on your natural and be ready to go toe on to their side and go touch that piece, right? If we know that they have 2 infiltrators even, they're going to take, like, there's no reason to fight over the center. They only have to touch it, right? We'll just give that up. So save your infiltrators, wait for them to have dropped both of theirs, and then you can go, okay, well, mine are going to come here. We're going to pre-measure. We have a 6-inch move, whether we're towing onto the front, even if we have to, right? With a model, we know that we can make it to do it there, right? That's the big thing, is being reactive. Don't just be like, oh, well, crap, they took the bottom and I can't deal with them in the middle. Use your infiltrators to go do it on the other side for a turn. It's like that, you have to be able to make that adjustment.
Flexible armies can consistently get points. So yeah. Okay. All right. We've talked about layout A a lot. Any final thoughts laying on layout A?
No, I think we've covered a lot of the mission. So I think we can fly through these last 2 layouts for y'all.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. We got another central combined objective, which is important because it, for the recon player, we only get points for the center. There's only 1 center objective. But we also have a very interesting deployment lane. Look at these outside firing lines. There is a lot of space here from the deployment zones to actually go out and punch to the other side, which is kind of terrifying because it means that this space is pretty much unusable unless you have like a lone op unit or you have something else that you can stick in this corner. But both of these side alleys are, depending on your army, they may be great because you can just like poke out and control this firing lane. Other armies is like, no, I actually just can't go out there.
Yeah, it is very wide open. Again, we've talked a lot about this in the videos. Keeping good, especially shooting assets off the board, doesn't hurt you, especially on these maps where I believe those dense terrain features in the middle that are the key to, a lot of these missions, either within 5 inches. And since you can touch that and see through the whole ruin because they're combined, there's the eye, as we're looking at the map, you can come in from the side of the board and still just see so much because it's just not actually in your way. And also you just, it feels so awkward, I think, on these maps to successfully take up space for the long term in front of your natural to prevent things from coming in. It can feel like a lot, but you need to be planning to do that turns 2 and turn 3. You need to be able to go put something out there that can go take up that space because it's just so easy to walk in off the side of the board and just pepper things on your natural with any good shooting unit.
Yeah. If I was a recon player, I would actually be trying to collapse the flank going after my opponent's natural or my opponent's home, especially if they didn't commit properly. If they're in a position where they haven't put enough assets here and like I can be slightly aggressive and maybe even flip my opponent's home, I don't expect to hold it or maintain it, but I do need you to turn around because I'm threatening two things. I'm threatening an additional 4 points on primary for me because it's another objective, and I'm also threatening like, hey, I'm all my good secondaries, whether it be forward position, behind enemy lines, like I can get points back here and still be effective. And then it's going to deny points for my opponent as well because stuff like defense stronghold is still real, and they do have to turn around, or else I'm just going to start picking up trading pieces behind here. And if I clear the screens out of this area, Lane is absolutely right. Like if I can just control this space here and say my opponent cannot wrap in anywhere here to get after my natural, that's really important for both players. Because for the priority player, if I can deny you holding your natural one time, and then also I can deny you doing the action, that's 8 points, right? And now I stand a realistic chance to actually catch up. But that means I'm controlling the tempo of the game because I'm pushing your natural and then I'm forcing you to react to it. I'm pushing your home, I'm forcing you to react to it. There is a benefit of being able to do that, but that is strictly dependent on the type of army that you decide to take and then how you build that army. Because some armies are very capable of doing that. Like I think of like my Wind Rider host list that I'm running right now is like, no, I could very easily push your home. I am so fast, and I have up down, and I have a reactive, and I can get wherever I need to, and I could push this side of the terrain and the side of the map and say, okay, well, if you come anywhere within this space, right? Like I could rapid ingress a unit of bikes, which is very, very nice because it's very hard to threaten these firing lanes. Because another thing that I think is really important for a lot of these lists, especially on this layout, is like, do I have long range shooting assets? Well, I have fire prisms. You poke out anything without an invul, I will kill it. And if it doesn't have an invul, if it does have an invul, great. I'm going to give you some pretty obnoxious saves. But realistically, like I'm looking to poke out here and control this space because the rapid ingress is so important. There are multiple other armies that do that. Votan comes to mind incredibly well, right? Like obviously, those hearth bricks want to be dropping in the middle so they can be effective. But if I can threaten this spot and then rapid ingress behind this 2x6, and then put a unit of Hearthguard right here, well, yes, I understand they only move 5 inches. But realistically, if you have anything decently screening this center objective, right, like I could very easily get here and start to charge things that are on your home, which I really like. I think that's really important, right? So how do we control that firing lane, opening up very, very safe rapid ingresses? We do it with long range shooting assets that have good shooting. And then we do it with good rapid ingresses that can then punish our opponent's natural. And we can only do that if we control these side shooting lanes as either player.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very important to be able to threaten those if you can. If you are a melee army, don't worry. You still can just benefit from gone to ground and hidden and all the other stuff that's just inbuilt into the game. And really focus like on the center and working the middle of the board itself to very good effect, and using rapid ingresses yourself once you see where units have committed, much, much easier. And very, very good. So looking at this map again, right, we know we're trying to use those side ruins in the center to get our actions for priority. It's the exact same format basically as Recon. You're still looking to stand on them and deny. It's just this one is a little bit more open in terms of those side firing lanes, but they're still very, very good staging points. It's a little more awkward to potentially make the leap, we'll say, from your own natural to that middle terrain area. It's a little bit farther away, but still very, very doable to go be annoying or start putting some pressure on. Still totally possible. But yeah, I think all of the info basically still stays very similar to layout A. We're still looking to rapid in those same places, or not rapid, still rapid, but infiltrate in those same places, right? Trying to either secure the pocket or deny the pocket, and yeah, it's just the same old thing.
Yep. Okay, all right, let's move on to the last layout.
Sweeping engagement, you dirty whore. I'm so tired of board edges already, and it's only like 6 weeks in, bro. I'm tired of how frequently they're in all of it. But it's fine. It is fine. Still some decent sightlines along the edges here, and still very good staging. I don't know what it was about Recon versus Priority, but they finally were like, you know what? We're going to use the 10 by 2.5s and the short 6 by 2s and make them actually very easy and accessible ruins to navigate through. In so many of the other ones, you're just like, well, my tank is just kind of half stuck here and only can really go one way. Actual freedom on this map. You love to see it. You can easily stage behind your natural with vehicles, because you can either touch and just see so much of the center, you can swing to the side and just see a ton of stuff. It's insane just how mobile you really can be. And if you even have a fast unit, I was watching my buddies play a game the other night with Bringers of Flame. Castigators move 12 inches base and have advance and shoot baked in that. You can just shove them through your natural and just touch that terrain piece and just see the world. Like, it's insanity how much you really can just use speed on these maps to just zip forward and see the world. But yeah, again, nothing really changes. We're still infiltrating in very similar spots, whether it's for completing the action for priority or trying to be touching these terrain pieces to deny it. It is a little bit more awkward, I will say, I think, to feel okay about denying the ones on the edges as the recon player, just because it's still not uber hard for them to get an asset out to the side to kind of see you or interact with you. But again, if they are wanting to start the trade game, as long as they have to expose it and come peek around the edge, they're generally going to have to be pretty in the open.
Yeah. The only problem is both of these terrain pieces are dense terrain pieces here in the center. So like it very realistically, the priority player could still be obscured. They come up here, they do the action, they don't do anything else. They kill the unit that you have here with maybe another unit. And then ideally, maybe they do it with a combat unit, right? And they very specifically don't end on the piece of terrain. And then the unit you actually need to kill is hidden and gone to ground and inside terrain. So now it's maybe -1 to hit. Like it could be very difficult to deal with it. And it's partially because it's very easy to go to ground here. Pretty much anywhere you go, because you're going to be obscured by dense terrain in one way or another. And then it's the same thing here. Like, yes, as the recon player, can we come up and touch? Absolutely. The same idea is going to be present of like, how do we stop this from happening? And then how do we like realistically, every turn I should be threatening hold more into my opponent until I've secured the game. So it's like, how do I threaten as a recon player to hold more each time? The easiest way to do it is, well, I'm going out to the center anyways because I need the 3 VP for controlling the center. So I'm going to be doing that every time, and I need to do that. Like, I need to realize what the asset is that I'm putting out there, because my opponent will eventually, as Lane talked about, if they watch Mastercrafted, which they should, share it with all your opponents so they can also give you as good a games as possible and help you get better. But at some point, they're going to look to deny the center. They're going to look to deny the center by either pressing beyond the objective to make sure that you can't get to it, or putting enough OC with a high durability unit and saying, you can't actually kill this right now. So, like, that is a very real thing, and you have to be cognizant of the fact that they're going to try to stop you that way. So I need a buffer of points, and unfortunately that means I need to consistently threaten holding more than just my natural. I need to threaten getting that 8, maybe even a 12. Threaten the 12. Get on your opponent's natural, and then say, okay, well, I'm on all 3 objectives. I've flipped all 3 of these, and I've killed something. Now you have to deal with killing all 3 of these units to stop me from scoring a 12 or an 8, and then being in a position to counterpunch whatever they came after. So that's why those trading pieces are so important. That's why armies like GSC and Eldar and Guard do recon and disruption so well, is because they have the trading assets to go out and do it, to score things like that. But there's other ways that you can do it there. If you're relying on durability and recon, which is very real, great, that's fine. Absolutely fantastic. You have to be in a good position to deal with that kind of stuff. And recon could go out and do that, throw out on all 3 objectives and say, okay, I'm too durable for you to actually kill me, but that's your go turn. And then you have to be able to survive and then push through. So yeah, it's you're doing the same thing as we talked about in the previous maps, though. The recon player, we're still looking to infiltrate. We're managing our opponent's resources. We're verifying how realistic is it for them to come out and touch and do the action on the center and on these 2 middle terrain pieces. And then, hey, they're only threatening run 1 right now. Great, we go out and we deny that, right? Because if we can deny the action 1 time, that is 4 points. That is a significant benefit for us.
Yeah, I think the only other thing, and we touched on it on the last one, Phil really went in depth on the pros of doing it, but I don't know if you have noticed when you look at this, those home objectives are so insanely open that if you do not control the terrain pieces, or at least, if you can't reliably keep assets there, it's so easy to either rapid or just come in off the board edge and just start dominating someone's home if they're not careful, because it's just wide open. That L feels horrible sitting the way it is, and if you need to have it, and it feels so hard to screen this out effectively. You need something sitting towards the back, but the main thing is you have to control that terrain piece, right? If we're looking at the blue player up top, you have to be taking space and really trying to fight over that terrain area below it, because if you aren't taking up that space, it's so easy to come in and just really, start hammering the flank of that recon player. And that automatically, if the priority assets player, for instance, can come in, you're not getting 5 points at the end of the game if they have anything left in your territory, and if they hold your home, that's just free points for them, right? Like it's very, very worth it. And you don't want to be giving that up if you can help it, especially as recon, but also, even as a priority player, right? It's still valuable to make sure that, they're not stealing your home. If they get 4 points for controlling one thing and you leave your home as a really weak flank because you overcommitted to pressuring maybe even their home on your side or the middle, and you just didn't leave anything on that edge of the board, if they can come in one turn, clean it off, and then just stand on there, maybe they have up down on something that can drop in there. It's so brutal. Making sure you control those edges of the board remains so important on these missions, especially against fast armies and mobile armies. I would not love to play Grey Knights, for instance, without a bunch of screens on this board. That sounds horrible. Or
Any
Deathwatch,
up down
maybe.
army, yeah, any up down army just like feels real. Raven Guard, right? Like Death Watch, even Eldar. Like we just talked about Wind Rider. I'm very high on Wind Rider right now. I've been running them, so I'm just waiting for an opportunity to play them. I haven't been afforded the opportunity just yet, but I have a GT coming up here soon, so probably gonna take that just because I really enjoyed that list and I want to see how it's tested at a GT level. So we'll see. I think we've hammered this into the ground lane. Yes,
Yep.
there are great staging points in our deployment zone. Yes, we realistically we need to cover a lot of these areas because it is very hard to control space in these corners. But I would say I'll harken back to Matt Merle, one of our good friends who's come on the series of multiple times. He coined the phrase triangle of power. The triangle of power actually isn't all three objectives. It's really realistically our home. It's realistically this terrain piece here, and then it's realistically like this central objective. Like the majority of the game is going to be played around these three things in terms of how you can control them and how you can. Because if you cannot control this expansion terrain piece, like as the recon player, you are going to lose this game because they're going to be able to do their action for free. They're going to be able to push your home in, and then they're going to start scoring points based on, hey, well, you can no longer threaten my action, and I'm just going to do it for free over and over again. Like you have to control this space, unless you're just planning on tabling your opponent, which is a real thing, like in 11th edition. Like you have to be prepared for that. The table is real, but yeah, this three terrain piece area is just so important.
Yeah, like you're still going to be trying to, making sure you're trying to hold on to your natural and stuff. But in terms of actual, what is the majority of your army committed to? I think Phil's absolutely right. Right. We, as a priority player, we want to make sure we can definitively always secure that action, always fight over the center, and just really make sure, we're doing our best to control a concentrated effort towards that part of the board.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Lane, that was a long one.
That was, man. I mean, I feel like this mission, though on paper it looks very simple, like I feel like a lot of people aren't paying attention to like, oh, if I just touch stuff onto the terrain, it makes their life infinitely harder. And a lot of people can look at that stuff and just maybe they haven't played much recon themselves, or maybe they have been playing it for a little bit, but they're just like, oh, this mission just feels horrible. Like priority just scores so easy and stuff. If you learn some of these tips and tricks that we're talking about, it can help you so much on really balancing that matchup to where recon feels actually fairly good into priority even.
That's why recon is one of the most popular dispositions right now. It does have some play, right? There is a world where you can do things to stop your opponent, which is kind of unique because not all dispositions have that. Taking hold and purge, like they don't have a lot that allows you to interact with your opponent in meaningful ways. You're just kind of playing your own game. But recon and disruption are definitely in that boat of having an effect on your opponent's primary and being rewarded for it. So
yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. It always helps us out. Comment below. Tell us how your games have been going. We'd love to hear it. Or chat with us in the Discord. The link is below. Any other thoughts, Phil? I know we got teams events coming up this weekend. We got challengers coming up. We'll probably be doing some videos a little bit on some teams prep, getting ready for that. But we've just been, I don't know, we've been uber busy. So we're hoping to have a little more free time to keep cranking out some content for y'all. But, in the meantime, enjoy it. And do not forget that victory isn't given. It is forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We'll see y'all next time.
see you guys.